Hey everyone, welcome back. Dave in History for the Ages here. So, an economic history topic. I don't do too much of economic history, but I think this is a really interesting topic. And I'd love to know, of course, your thoughts in the comments. Do the rich pay enough, right? And how much do you think they should pay? And how much do you think they actually pay? And so, what I want to do is, first of all, give a history of the graduated income tax, explain what it is. That's going to be my first step. What is a graduated income tax? Sometimes called a progressive tax, and give some history about it and kind of look at some numbers and get your thoughts, of course, in the comments as we go through it. So, first of all, what is a graduated income tax? And so, this is kind of how I explain this to my students. And I say, I try to imagine there's 100 people in a society, right? Person one is the poorest person, he makes $1 a year. Person 100, he's the richest person, he makes $100 a year. If everybody pays 10% taxes, right, then person number one would pay 10 cents a year, and person number 100 pays $10 a year. That would be a flat tax, right? That's, everyone pays the same percentage. That's the flat tax. A graduated income tax, to give you a really extreme example of it, is person number one, since they only make $1 a year, would pay 0% in taxes. And person number 100, just to give you an exaggerated example, would pay 90% in taxes, right? Obviously, and I'm going to talk about how high does it get and all that in a couple more slides here. And then they would pay $90 a year, right? So in other words, the more you make, it's not just the more taxes you're paying at a higher percentage. So that's what we mean by a graduated income tax. So if you make very little, you have very little wealth, you don't pay many taxes. If you have more wealth, you pay a higher percentage. So it's not just everyone paying the same percent, you're paying more, you're actually paying a higher percentage. So that's what a graduated income tax is. And one of the interesting questions that comes up a lot when I bring this up, before I even get into the kind of the more history of it, is how much do the rich pay in the U.S.? And I put some numbers here, and this fluctuates from year to year. Obviously it does change, so obviously depending on when you're watching this, it could be different. But basically, the top 1% of earners, the wealthiest people in the United States, actually pay about 45% of the money used to run this country. So let's say again, if there was $100 needed to run the United States, the $45 of that $100 is paid by 1% of the people. The top 20%, the wealthiest 20 people, they pay about 70%. So again, that would be $70 out of the $100. And of course, the argument is, well, they have more money, more wealth, they should pay more. The bottom 50% pay about 3% of our taxes. So again, if you have $100 that you need to run a nation, the top 1% pay 45 of those dollars, the top 20% pay $70, the bottom 50% only pay $3, right, of that $100. So in terms of how much the rich pay, they actually do pay a bigger chunk. I'm amazed how many times I ask my students this and say, who do you think pays more? And students really don't realize this. They actually think that richer people pay either the same or even less than poorer people, but that's just not the case. Now, this is not a new idea, right? In terms of using a graduated income tax, you could have examples all the way from ancient Egypt. We have papyrus indicators, primary sources from papyrus, for example, which talked about, how certain people were taxed more based on how much they can contribute to society. Ancient Rome had a similar idea. When we see people with kind of higher classes and so forth, they were required to contribute more. So it's not kind of a new idea. And there's, of course, a logic to it. Of course, if you have more and you need whatever you need to run a nation, there's a certain amount that you're going to have to give. Now, there are more modern examples, and of course, one of the most modern ones is Karl Marx, right? Because Karl Marx in his Communist Manifesto in 1848 specifically called for a quote unquote heavy graduated income tax. In the US, what we start to see, of course, is the 16th Amendment. Boo, right? Nobody likes the 16th Amendment. But of course, that's the one that allowed the federal government to start a federal income tax. And in the beginning, it was very low, right? I mean, Woodrow Wilson, 1913, it was 1% for low income, 7% for high income. Still, it was, a graduated income tax. Today, again, depending on when you're watching this in the United States, if you're a low earner, you make no money, you pay 0%. You're not really paying at the end of the day any federal income tax, right? There are, of course, other taxes people pay, sales tax, and so forth. But a federal income tax, you're paying net zero, actually probably paying less than net zero, believe it or not, because you're getting things as well. High earners pay about over 30%, right? Now that's the federal. We're not talking about state taxes and so forth. So if you're a really high earner, depending on what state you live in, you might be already giving away about 50% of what you earn to the government, right? If you're living in like California, which is a pretty high earned state, and you're paying federal tax and state tax and property tax and sales tax, probably about half of what you earn, maybe even a little bit more, goes to the government. So that's quite a bit. All right, so those are some more modern examples of it. Now, one of the consequences of this is another interesting topic. There's an economist called named Laffer, called the Laffer curve is what we get from it. And the philosophy behind this is, at what point can you tax somebody so high that it actually hurts revenue? Because if the whole point of taxation is to bring money in, well, obviously, if you tax everybody zero, the government's going to collect zero, right? But if you tax everybody 100% and everybody knows that everything they work is going to go 100% to the government, no one's gonna work, right? I mean, if I work and every penny I go goes in, and so, but you're gonna have is basically nobody's gonna work, or people are gonna find ways not to report their income, and the revenue is gonna be zero as well. So that's basically kind of the idea of the Laffer curve. You have zero and zero, and so you have to find kind of that sweet spot in the middle where the tax rate is at a place where you can collect kind of the optimal amount of revenue. So it's kind of can get dangerous if you tax too high, or of course, if you don't tax enough, you don't have enough to run a society. There are different theories on how to do taxation. Some people say get rid of the federal taxes completely and do everything on a sales tax, a federal sales tax instead of a state tax. The, again, logic behind that is if somebody is wealthy, they're buying more expensive stuff, they're again going to contribute more. If somebody is poor and they're just buying their basic food and necessities, well, they're not going to end up paying much in taxes, right? So there's different ways and different approaches how to do this. But again, as the old saying, in history, nothing is certain but death and taxes, and they've been around forever. All right, so there's pros and cons to everything, and of course, when you look at a graduated income tax, right, it obviously helps fund the economy and fund the government to do things, fund public services and so forth. But of course, if you start taxing people too high, then again, it could actually slow economic growth. It kind of leads people to avoid taxation. And so that can stifle the economy. And there's a bunch of historical examples you could literally look up and see when tax rates went down and revenue went up. So it is possible to lower taxes and create more revenue, because if I lower taxes, then a company can produce more, make more, and as they make more revenue, I could get 10% out of somebody making $1 million is a lot more than 20% out of somebody making $1,000, right? Whatever it is, I'm not good at math, so I just threw something quick out, right? But that's kind of the idea behind it. So anyways, I hope that gave you some interesting things to think about, kind of different topic. Enjoy. I've got a bunch of other videos you can watch on all sorts of great topics, some short history videos. Feel free to please share your comments, share the video, and I hope you found that interesting. All right, everyone, thank you for watching. Have a great day.